So after all of this landscaping business, I want to get into, I guess, pruning the shrubs here of the Detroit Lions because the Detroit Lions now will be, I believe, 6 players down heading into this season. And why is that? You think injury? Camps haven't even started yet. The draft is on Thursday. Well, sports gambling came up again in the news, and you talked about controversy. And I think this one is very, very juicy for me because I don't think it's a morality thing. I think it comes down to how are these sports leagues going to manage this. But at the end of the day, 6 players were suspended, I think 6 games, which is not half the season, but it's a significant amount these days for betting not on football, but on other sports. And I find it fascinating because the NFL and all these sports leagues are in bed with places like DraftKings and FanDuel. Sports betting is becoming legal in many states. It's legal here in Virginia, I believe. And I find that this is going to be very, very difficult to navigate. But I just wanted to start out with your thoughts on how you received the news of players being suspended for gambling, knowing that all of this stuff is percolating in the background.
Initially, I look at it as an IQ test, and I heard someone refer to drug tests in the NFL this way. They said they know exactly when you're going to be drug tested, and so you have to be a complete idiot to fail a drug test in the NFL. And I think this is very similar. It's very obvious through the history of sports, not just modern days, that gambling is very taboo against the rules, and there are usually swift and severe consequences for breaking those rules. And so to do so speaks to your level of intelligence at a very in a very significant way, in my opinion. Yeah, it's a problem because you have people that are gonna make stupid choices and bet on games, bet on the leagues they're playing in. One thing I did find interesting though that I wasn't necessarily aware of. I guess it's illegal for NFL players to bet on any professional sport or maybe do any sort of sports gambling because I think a couple or one of the guys that got suspended, the one that got suspended for 6 games, the wide receiver, I don't think he bet on any NFL games, but he had bet on other
Yes.
non-NFL sporting events. So I think that's kind of jacked up. I mean, I get they might have friends, close friends that play in other leagues and things like that, and more access than the average person. I think they should be able to bet on horse racing or an NBA game or whatever.
So I think this comes down to it's sort of similar to your take here about an IQ test, but I think this comes down to players understanding the confines and the rules by which they are asked to be a part of, I guess, or confined to within their employer. Cleve and I talk about this a lot with these guys who get hurt outside of the team facility and are upset when the team can void their contract, or guys who pop positive for PEDs nowadays. Your trainer should be 100% sure of every single thing that you're putting into your body. And if you are a part of the NFL and there are ground rules for which you cannot gamble, now I believe that many sports leagues, including the NFL, will allow you to. There are certain stipulations that you can't do, like you can't do it in the hotel or things like that. I did hear a funny story about how there were boats in Miami that used to pick up people, travel to what is considered international waters, and the casino would open and you could gamble. And you're right, gambling is seen as a taboo, but I think it's kind of shifting a little bit. And that's why I find this fascinating. But I think when it comes to the players, I don't feel bad for them. I think it's a little bit jacked up in some ways because the NFL is making a lot of money off of this. And then they're turning around and trying to be stern and make the rules enforceable and all that. But these are regular people. Like if the NFL feels as if suspending these guys is going to deter them from gambling, it's so not going to happen. They're going to do it.
So one thing I don't know either that's kind of been cycling through my head as you're talking about it. Is there any sort of profit sharing that's built into the current CBA when it comes to sports gambling revenue? And I wonder if that's an angle that the league could use to decentivize sports gambling because hey, like listen, like we understand we're making money hand over fist on this and it's only right that we share those profits with the players. And maybe that would be a way that could help curb it some. But I don't think that people are they're not gambling for the money. They're gambling in most cases people are gambling for the entertainment. That's when I place a $5 bet on a game, it's purely for entertainment. I don't need that $4.90 I'm going to win. You know what I mean? Like it's I could be betting $1 on a game and I'm just it just makes me more interested just because there's something on the line. Like it just it's more engaging. And I don't know how if the money would be enough to keep them from engaging in that form of entertainment or not. But I'm also I'm a live and let live kind of person. I don't think that you should have things, especially things that are available that are legal for everyone else to do. They shouldn't be able to legislate you not being able to do it. But I agree that you can't bet on, like, if you're an NFL player, you should not be able to bet on NFL games. Like, that's a very common sense thing to me. But beyond that, I think they should have the freedom to do whatever. But I don't feel bad for them either because they're adults, they're grown men, and they know the consequences. And I do think that that, like I said, the punishments should be swift and severe when the rules are broken in regards to gambling. I don't think this is some red flag that says we made a mistake by legalizing gambling and need to go in reverse. I definitely don't think that needs to happen.
I'm a firm believer that there are rules and laws in place that I almost say shouldn't be in place because I think that they prevent stupid people from doing stupid things. And it's like a form of natural selection. And maybe that's callous for me to say. So I'm not advocating for people to hurt themselves or get hurt. But I'll use an example. You talk about motorcyclists and wearing helmets, and there is a large contingent of people that ride motorcycles who feel almost too cool for school that they don't want to wear their helmet. I don't have an issue with that because if you get in a wreck, happily it will probably be just you that has brain damage or is dead because you're not wearing your helmet. Your helmet won't necessarily save your life, but it may be a big contributor in you surviving and or not having brain damage, right? So it seems common sense to me that you'd want to wear that if you're taking such a high risk. And if you don't want to do that, fine. Seatbelt laws. For children, it's one thing, but for adults, if you're an adult, and I'm going to say this looking at the camera, if you're an adult and wearing a seatbelt is too much for you driving a 2-ton vehicle, I'm not really sure what to say for you. It's common sense to me that you should do that. And the fact that there's laws that make it so that people have to do this, it's like you're saving people from themselves. And gambling is just like any other vice. You need to be cautious if you are somebody who has an addictive personality or you can't control it or you can't control your funds, what have you. It's not on the NFL to legislate that. But I think the other side of the coin of betting in general for sports figures is there are certain things that can happen even if they're not betting on their own sports. And I'll give you an example. There's an NBA player who once was in a game. It was a game that was well out of reach, but he understood and he knew that there was an over-under on how many three-pointers he was going to make. He also knew that his friend in the crowd needed him to make one more to get that. So he took a needless shot that ended up going in, and he ended up getting in his friend some money. And so in that regard, if the players are very aware of their lines and so forth, it could affect how they play because maybe, just maybe, they're playing to reach those potentials or reach those, betting odds or what have you. And that may affect the overall outcome of the game, despite the fact that they themselves are not betting on the game. I do think it's not immoral, but it is a tricky or a slippery slope in this regard because these players have to know. Like they all have to know, right? Like, do you think that any NFL player goes into a game or most NFL players go into a game not knowing what the betting line is? It's got to be used as bulletin board material.
Oh, absolutely it is. It's almost like we need to start treating professional athletes like you treat a jury. You close them off from all outside news conversations so they're not aware of what the lines are or who's betting on what. Yeah, they're aware of it. And the thing is that they've always been aware of it. None of this stuff is really new. It's more out in the public eye now. I mean, everybody before FanDuel and DraftKings, everybody was betting online through offshore casinos. And I mean,
Hmm.
that's the only difference. I do think it's better that it's more in the forefront. It is regulated in some way. The fact I think that it is so common and popular should make it easier to catch people who are violating and breaking the rules. I mean, because they're going to get most people talk too much, right? Myself included. And they're going to start running their mouth about, they're going to make a mistake and say something they shouldn't have said about, like, hey, man, I won this bet on this or something like that. And I just think that the more it's out in the public eye, the easier it's going to be to catch people that are betting on stuff they're not supposed to be betting on. Maybe I don't know. I just think it's a stupid decision. You should know the rules. You're responsible for making the right choices, and I have no sympathy for these guys and the punishments they're receiving.
From what I understand, FanDuel and DraftKings are actually going to the NFL to give them news if a player, a known player, is actually placing a bet through the app and vice versa. The NFL is going to them. And at first I thought, man, that's really whack for them to make so much money and then narc out these people. But DraftKings, just as much as the NFL, needs this product to be as pure as possible. They need to keep their players out of it. But the other aspect of this that I want to get your opinion on, I think up until now, the people that have been suspended for gambling, Calvin Ridley, not much of a name, a good receiver, but not much of a name, and a bunch of Detroit Lions who really are inconsequential to the team. But what do you think would happen if a player of, say, Patrick Mahomes' caliber or Lamar Jackson, Tua, whatever, a big time quarterback bordering on face of the league got hit and was found out that they were gambling, do you think the NFL would make an example of them and swiftly suspend them? Or do you think that the NFL wouldn't risk the face of their league and kind of sweep it under the rug?
I think they would have to act swiftly and severely. The question is, would they? I think they would because I feel like they would want to make an example of someone, and especially if you the higher profile that person is, the more of an example it would be. And the NFL, the Shield, is greater than any one player, and they know that. And before Patrick Mahomes, there was Tom Brady, you know, and when Patrick Mahomes goes, there's going to be someone right there to fill his shoes as the quote unquote face of the league. I don't think that they've got too many, concerns about that. I think that they would go after. They would almost think. I think they'd almost get. I mean, they'd be disappointed, but they'd almost get excited about the opportunity to like make a really impactful example of someone and show that hey, nobody's above this. At least that's what I think they should do.
It's an interesting perspective because I could see both arguments. I mean, with Deflategate, which was about a football that wasn't quite inflated properly, Tom Brady got a suspension of 4 games. So I guess if they're willing to go that route, they would make an example of a player, but I don't think they want that on their doorstep. And I think it is going to happen eventually. They're going to reach a point where they're going to either have to make a decision of what do we do? Do we make an example or do we try to sweep this under the rug and protect the image of the league? You talk about the Shield, and what comes with that is the Shield, the image of the Shield, the optics of everything that they do is very, very important. And Roger Goodell is 100% going to do what makes the league look the best as often as possible. And sweeping it under the rug may end up being that. I mean, it has long been rumored that Michael Jordan's first retirement was because of gambling. And so I heard the joke that maybe Mahomes would take 2 years off and go play baseball for a couple years and then come back. I mean, if anybody is suited to do that, it's Mahomes. I mean, his dad was an MLB pitcher. But I think about this a lot now because Pete Rose is banned from the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame for famously gambling on his own sport, not in his own team, but on his own sport. And there have been arguments to be made all across the board. But do you think that the rise in sports betting makes his offense less egregious and MLB really just needs to rip the band-aid off, put him in the Hall of Fame as a baseball player and then distance themselves from him, the human being, because he's definitely tone deaf.
Yeah, this is difficult because when you look at Pete Rose, the baseball player, the guy was an absolute monster. I mean, Charlie Hustle, right? And he played the game the way that you definitely don't really see it anymore. The style with which he played, obviously very successful, breaking records, winning championships, but he broke the rules. He knew what the rules were, and he broke the rules, and he knew what the consequences were for breaking those rules, and he is gonna pay the price for it the rest of his life. And I want to say, like, and this is gonna be, I mean, it's unpopular, but I think that the way it's being handled currently is the right way. Like, I does he deserve? Was his playing career deserving of the Hall of Fame? Absolutely, 100%. But you broke the rules, period. And whatever. I'm sure there's other people that did it and never got caught, but you did. I know that he's tried to make amends and stuff like that, but it just is what it is, man. Like you can't flip the script on this now because that's spineless to me a little bit from the MLB's perspective. I don't think. I mean, what message does that send to current players if you were to do that? Well, I'll eventually, my legacy will eventually be solidified in the Hall of Fame, once this blows over. I don't think that sports gambling being legal diminishes the fact that it's against the rules to bet on your team, your sport at all. And I'm pro gambling. I like gambling, but like you simply cannot have current players betting on their sport and especially not on their team at all. There's just a zero tolerance situation.
Does it change that he was a manager at the time?
I think that now you could have that argument. Do you just say, okay, you're not going to put him in as a manager, you put him as a player? But I mean, he got banned from baseball. They didn't say we banned Pete Rose, the manager, from baseball, but Pete Rose, the player, is still. No, I mean, I think that he burned his bridge, man. Like I think it's that simple. He burned his bridge. It doesn't take away from his accomplishments, but You've got to be you can't be banned from baseball and make the Hall of Fame. That's just just how it goes, man. Like it sucks. It really sucks. But you know what? He's the only person to blame for this. He's the only person in the wrong.
This is a seminal moment for the show. I never thought in a million years that I would be standing on the side of defending putting Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame as a player, and you standing there having the kind of stance. I would have assumed that it would be in reverse, because for many years I felt that way about Pete Rose, that you broke the rules, that's it. And then I've softened on this because I've softened also on guys that are PED guys, but I think it's an interesting discussion to have because now MLB is siphoning in money through sports betting, and then he is still banned. And I still feel like you can acknowledge that what he did was bad and that it's not something that you want or going to tolerate from your players. But it just, I don't know, like nowadays it feels very harsh to still have him be banned when the people that are banning him now, probably some of them weren't even alive when he was playing, like the officials and stuff. So that could be something for a deeper discussion when we get toward Hall of Fame and all that kind of stuff. But as far as sports gambling is concerned, it's certainly it came to my mind when I thought about these guys in the NFL because they're just the tip of the iceberg now with this. Whereas Pete Rose has dominated that space for a long time. But Pete Rose, I think now is a villain in Major League Baseball still for probably a lot of people. Certainly every time he makes an appearance, he does something idiotic.